just feel free to tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I mean, I've been in the industry for, I would say, pushing 16 years now. The point which I started all those years ago was more at the coalface of the industry. So the majority of my work in those initial years was working the day-to-day methods of the retailers and brands within Europe, both from a buying perspective and a distribution perspective, and then working a lot with some of the retailers, the main retailers out in Seoul and Korea, like Hyundai.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, at the coalface, kind of learning the mechanisms of how a product, after a product is produced and is purchased on a B2B scale, so on the large scale, how does it kind of maneuver or be chosen to go into a certain retailer, at what price, how does it get discounted, all of those different facets. So I was a buyer at one stage, I was a distributor at some stage, a sales rep at some stage.
Amazing.
And I think that was created the foundation for kind of where I am now, understanding the space that both of us work in, the rules, the applications, but also the general Excel spreadsheets and pen and paper that everyone was using back in those days.
Yeah.
And then
how did you kind of end up at NuORDER?
Good question. The absolute truth, I can't remember exactly because it was a long time ago and now we're both old. And those things don't roll off the tip of my tongue or at the top front of my head. But I remember the first conversations that I had with the team was pretty revolutionary because at the time, or at that moment, I was distributing brands like Samso out to Korea and made a lot of contacts and you know, met with people like Vitas, and was understanding how people like him or his team were moving products out to Korea and to different locations. And at that point, brands and retailers were using ERPs, Excel, and spreadsheets, and pen and paper. And then when NuORDER came along and said, hey, we're doing this, but digitizing the experience, not only was the actual product and the technology fantastic, but it would also hit a pain point that I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I started in their London office. This is, I'm going to say 10 or 12 years ago, who knows at this point, and helped them grow their business across Europe, the UK, and some US and the Australia too, for 8 or 9 years. Really exciting, really good fun. But most importantly for me, the biggest facet was the ability to talk about the problem that the brand was facing, understand what the problem with the brand was facing, and say, hey, by the way, you can use this. And this is how the technology is going to fit with your existing tech stack. But those road reps that you have, or those sales agents or distributors you have, can also log in. And most importantly, so can your buyers. So yeah, it was quite an experience. Really, really, really good energy and fun.
Yeah, I mean, you really came in, especially with COVID, I guess, accelerating those type of initiatives, even in the B2B space. Just what kind of initiatives and projects are you involved in at this point?
Yeah, right now, I suppose my heart remains very much within the fashion and retail space. My brain lives in the technology space, assisting those industries. So right now, I'm partnered with and acting fractionally, helping a number of tech startups or scale ups within the B2C and the B2B world, do similar things, right? So my work as a kind of a consultant is helping my network within the brand and retailer space understand what decisions they should be making for the new technologies that they should be bringing in, whether that's B2C or B2B. The partnership element too. So other tech companies that I would have met along the road over the couple of years, who they should be partnering with, and vice versa. And then also helping these tech companies understand, you know, where to get investment, how to get investment, and also then how to develop their go-to-market strategy, but also then as well, product development and rollout as well. So that's the space I'm in right now, which I have a huge amount of love for, because I think it's, I think the fashion, I mean, you and I have spoken about this before. The fashion and retail industry is of course, one of the biggest in the world. But it still remains pretty archaic when it comes to a technical perspective. And
certainly,
that is certainly, I think, one of the biggest issues is when we think about circularity or sustainability. The fashion industry is one of the biggest problems within that space for us globally as humans. And I think a huge part of that is ultimately because it's a little far behind on tech. And a lot of the problems that can be fixed by some of the new solutions, and also the older solutions kind of working hand in hand or in harmony, as I argue.
This is really great, Cillian, because you're literally in the intersection of a very exciting domain of both the fashion brands, the technologies, and all of the challenges that surrounds it. And I assume you really have to be observant of what is going on, and maybe even what will happen going forward. So I have this new segment for Behind the Scenes pod that I call Hype or Ripe. And I have a couple of statements, and I want to know your opinion if you think that this is simply still a hype, or if it's ripe for large-scale rollout and adoption by 2025.
Yikes. Okay. Is this going to get me in trouble, or okay? Let's go on.
We just want honest opinions. Well, we'll see.
Sure.
I'll start with the first one. So, hype or ripe by 2025? AI in fashion.
Hype.
Oh, wow.
I'll tell you what.
We can tell me briefly, then we can circle back after
let's circle back. Let's circle back.
All right, then. So what about circular economy models in fashion? Hype or ripe?
Ripe.
Okay. So ripe in the sense that it will have large-scale adoption by 2025.
Agreed. Yes.
Okay. How about traceability? And I know you have specifically knowledge about the digital product IDs, but just that concept of being able to follow the specific item from birth to recycling, hopefully.
Sure. I absolutely ripe. A tough one to manage, but ripe. Ready to go.
Okay. How about NFTs as a digital ownership for physical products?
That's a tough one, because I feel like I'm too old to answer questions like that. I don't know. In certain space, the fashion and retail industry is a very big industry. NFTs in certain elements of the industry, ripe. In others, hype or non-existent.
All right. Cool. That ends our segment. So if we circle back now, I think I'd like to just get your opinion about AI in fashion, why you think it's a hype. It really feels like other people might disagree with you, but what's your take on it?
I think so. Back to kind of one of my initial points is, as an industry, when I started in the industry, again, we had SAP or another ERP, we had Excel, and we had pen and paper, and we printed everything out, and we traveled not only across different markets with the clothes in boxes or suitcases to show at certain markets, but also suitcases full of printed catalogs. Now in 2025, there's a huge number of different elements of information that customers can receive from the brands or retailers, and then the teams within those companies have across different systems, right? So you have ERPs, B2Bs, B2Cs, PLMs, POS, everything. I think that there still remains a lot of work to be done at the intersection of connecting a lot of these systems properly, both in a one-way direction, so the information coming from the ERP and spitting down to all of these places, but also working back. And I think AI is absolutely ripe if the proprietary data is clean and clear. But
Okay.
if not enough of those systems are speaking to each other in the right way or right manner, then is AI doing enough of the work? So
Mm-hmm.
I believe people who are building AI products, but thinking about the different silos of data, connecting that
Mm-hmm.
and doing, allowing the AI to learn from all of that connected data, then yes. But I also think that there's certain groups who are just kind of um, leveraging those two letters stuck together rather than
Mm-hmm.
actually doing anything. The proprietary
Okay.
data must exist for the AI
Mm-hmm.
to work. And that's where I'm at.
Okay. So you do not believe, or you have a lack of confidence in the fact that brands will in 2025 succeed in unifying their data sources in a way where AI will be able to kind of take advantage of it or
I
leverage it.
think
Is that why I
I
hear?
I actually think that this year's work needs to be in connecting the systems
Mm-hmm.
um, in order to ensure that the proprietary or the siloed data can exist for AI to work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're not doing enough work there, or those individual
Yeah.
systems aren't doing enough, then it's going to be hard for it to really roll out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maybe then AI will be a driver and a reason for why brands should put the energy into making sure it's unified, because there might simply not be a good reason otherwise. But that comes
Yeah.
into the other point about traceability and being able to follow the product from start to end. So why do you then think that is ripe if the brands are still in a siloed mode when it comes to data?
Yeah, I think so. I think the mechanism, I think that the problem with traceability right now is the mechanism um, or the carrier. So RFID, things like that. I think this is going to be a really big year for those companies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I
Why?
think because I think people are ready now. I think there's been a lot of study done as to what and why and how. I think you look at companies like Avery Dennison, SML. Some of these companies have really put a lot of effort into ensuring that the customer, i.e., their B2B customer, a brand or
Mm-hmm.
retailer, understands how to purchase, how to leverage the carrier, and how to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that that's rolled out properly within their manufacturing processes. I think they've put in a huge amount of respectable work over the last 2 years. And that work from a B2B perspective, that's probably come with, a lot of consultative selling, um, a lot of traveling trips, teaching and lessons. And now I think the selling and the purchasing of these will come. So
Mm-hmm.
trans with that in mind, I think this is the year where the B2B element happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, maybe in 2026 too. And then the customer element, really, when the customer feels alive with it and ready to use it, will probably be in 2027 when some of the initial testing is rolled out and then full scale, it's happened too. I had
Mm-hmm.
myself and my partner, my wife Nadia, were speaking about this the other day, but I had to do something with my passport. And uh, I never knew. So the application that I was using asked me to scan the tag on my passport. And this was a couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks ago. I thought, I have no tag on my passport. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a passport I've been carrying for 10 years, whatever it might be. And then, of course, I go to the front of the passport, and my
Mm-hmm.
passport, my daughter's passport, and I put my phone up against it. And the little flag, which I thought was a representation of, I don't know, flags, was a tag. And then,
Yeah.
so I think the customer mindset, I think it goes back as well to, if we think about customer development needs to change, and that's a little while away. If you
Mm-hmm.
think about when COVID broke down and we all got to go back out to the pub or to the bar, um, the QR code sitting on the table
Mm-hmm.
was by no means something that you initially understood.
Mm-hmm.
And by now, if I walk into a bar for my pint on a Friday evening, I know what to do with the QR code. So I
Mm-hmm.
suppose
Yeah.
there's the B2B element is going to happen this year. I really feel it. I hope so, because I think it's great
Mm-hmm.
from an ROI perspective, but also from a traceability and transparency perspective. The knock-on effect is huge, but I think the customer element comes a little later, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. It definitely feels optimistic. listening to your predictions. So I'd like to move on to my second segment, and see what you think about this one. It's called Priorities 2025.
Okay.
And now you will get like a dilemma. So you'll get a question or statement, and I want you to basically tell me which of these options or which of the alternatives that you believe the brands will kind of increase their engagement in the most in 2025 compared to last year.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So here it comes. First priority 2025. Brands, will they prioritize standard SaaS software or custom in-house development solutions
Standard
compared
SaaS.
to last year?
Standard SaaS. Please God.
All right. We can circle back as well.
Standard SaaS.
All right. So prioritizing cost efficiency or driving revenue growth?
Good question. Good question. Cost efficiency, I would say.
Okay. That might be a topic to discuss later on, because it also requires quite a lot of investment into traceability and putting the silos together, especially if it's not going to yield like a direct result.
Sure.
But okay, third priority then. So focus on key or select wholesale customers versus expanding with new prospects.
Cool.
From a sales strategy, go-to-market strategy point of view, like are they focusing on their key customers, putting more effort there, or are they like,
I think key customers will be the focus.
Interesting. Yes. All right. How about creating a brand story or selling more on high markups, better prices?
Better prices and better markups.
So they will try to build less of the story around their brands. Interesting. All right, last priority dilemma here. What will influence decision-making the most? Enterprise management consultants or best-of-breed providers, success cases?
Best of breed.
Why you think that?
Because I think that the nature of the difficulties that the retail and fashion industry is facing right now absolutely requires people who have experience with those problems or with the mechanisms that are creating those problems. And that's what I would strongly agree with that.
Okay. I mean, that is, of course, requiring a strategy from the brands to make sure that they can incorporate multiple best-of-breed SaaS solutions. You also said before, hope to God that it is that over custom inbuilt. But I can also imagine that there is a lot of consultants or how do you say, I don't want to single out any specific consultant agency, but the big ones that may come in on a management level and have an idea on how to proceed. And it might not always be in their interest, I would assume. But what is your experience with that type of dilemma?
Yeah. I mean, in the last 15 years, probably more so in the last 8 years or 5 years, I think there is often good times to bring in a management consultant. I think, and a lot of those moments and times are stuff that I have no experience with. The stuff I have experience with and that my network and connections have experience with, I think ultimately, again, it's the little small processes and ideas that happen within the fashion and the fashion retailers and the brands that require people who have spent time within the industry to help move the needle on what is best for the brand or retailer.
I see.
And I think it's really important that that we put more energy as within the industry into focusing on fixing those problems more quickly and efficiently at a better, lower costs, but also within groups where there's better conversation about when a brand says, Cillian, this is my problem. I understand it like that. But not only that, I know someone within my phone book who's probably dealt with that within another brand or a larger group. Ultimately, the inefficiency can sometimes come, and I've experienced this, when a management consultancy group can step in to try and solve that problem, but they have to take 6 to 12 months to understand the problem, because the individuals within that group might not necessarily understand what a PLM is doing, or what sell-through data is, or what a case pack is when selling footwear, and what a bill of lading is when you're selling products to Korea. So I think if we're trying to think about, the other thing that you mentioned is, pulling your costs down, that can happen if you think about using the people you have internally in the business and other people who have, replicated their role years before and have gone on to do other things, to leverage those type of people. So quickly you can say, well, here is the problem, and here's the different solutions that can fix that. And let's do this in 3 to 6 months, rather than you have to spend 6 months with management consultancy discussing the problem so that they understand the problem. That would be my 2 cents.
All right. Is your understanding or belief that the management consultants would in the end have the same agenda in making sure that the best of breed solutions come into place? Or I'm just making things up right now, but I could imagine that there's also an interest by a certain type of large scale management consultant services that they might want to go for bigger enterprise solutions that will yield more hours after the initial 6 to 12 months. Right?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's 2 sides, right? There is the management consultant group that might be partnered with a large enterprise technology. And that's all well and good. But there's the other facet, which could be to your initial point or problem, which is the management consultancy might have a technology group within its organization that says, we'll build that. We'll build that for you. And the problems that begin to arise there is the costs increase tenfold. And on top of that, the nature of building a technology within your own business means it needs to be managed. It needs to be built first, costly. It needs to be managed. And then also in 3 years' time, when DPP times 10 comes out, you have to bring in a tech company again, or this company in again, to reconfigure. Whereas buying out of the box tends to mean that a SaaS solution is constantly looking at the market and effectively changing certain pipelines, looking at partnerships with other platforms. And that's where it becomes interesting, cheaper, and ultimately the ROI is.
But what would be your suggestion, maybe to end also on this topic,
Sure.
what would be your suggestion, especially to me who runs a SaaS company, in order to create a case and communicate in such a way where it will penetrate the potential blocking? I don't know if it's going to necessarily be blocking, but to make sure that the message comes across and into the management team that actually takes a decision, where there might be a management consultant.
Yeah, good question. I think it's again, it's a couple of things, it's several things, but I think ultimately it's about trying to show return on investment as soon as possible. It's also trying to show flexibility. I think one really interesting thing is looking at the way the market and the tech stack is built out now, and that the management of big brands and medium-sized and small brands need to realize that when you see a tech company that has got a partnerships director or like Shopify. If you want to go into Shopify and use any other tech that integrates in the back, it's like App Store, right?
Yeah.
Those are the kind of platforms that the managers need to be looking at, because it shows flexibility, reliability, and that's where the space needs to be. And that direction, people like me are hopefully trying to push businesses into that space to say, hey, look, you need to exist here because this is how your market exists, because your customer doesn't just exist online. You also exist in store. She also exists in Korea. He also exists in Ireland. And there's 101 different things you need to think about from a customer perspective now. And the tech stack needs to be flexible.
I mean, it makes sense. So I really, really hope, Cillian, that brands do listen to you who are in the mixture of stuff and do consider, a variety of providers and try to build the best possible portfolio of products to bring into a specific solution or to problem. But it was great to hear your thoughts and opinions about some of these topics. Thank you so much for joining in.
No, thank you for having me, Dennis.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely.